Good afternoon. Welcome back to Passionate World Talk Radio Network, a wholly owned subsidiary of Global Media Network LLC. Educate, enlighten, entertain. And this week's episode, we're talking about what is the SAVE, SAVE Act. Voter ID law passes the House. So, what is it all about? The SAVE Act is Save America's Voting Rights. In other words, you now have to prove that you are a USA citizen. This article is written by Kathy Palmer, and you can find her at USA Today. It's a bill that's been recommended highly by our current president that would require all citizens to provide proof of citizenship upon registering to vote. And this is the first step. But it is raising alarm among voter rights groups and experts. One of the fears is that if you're married, especially a woman, your name changes. It will not match up with either your passport or your driver's license, because not all women keep their maiden name. They take the name of the person who they are marrying. And therefore, when they change these names, they might have trouble proving that they're eligible to vote. The Safeguard American Voter Eligibility, or Save America Act, passed the GOP-led House of Reps on February 11th, but it's not guaranteed that it's going to pass the Senate. Previous versions of it have failed to gain traction in both chambers last year, and this latest round, which builds on the 2024 version, by adding a voter ID provision, must get 60 votes to pass. But, like I said, they passed it, but it could create voting barriers for married women, which goes along with our current administration stating that he didn't think women should vote at all. Something to think about, ladies. The legislation would require people to provide proof of citizenship in person, which means if you have a vote in mail ballot, you're in trouble when registering to vote in federal elections, and adds an additional requirement with an approved form of photo ID to cast their ballot. It also places new rules on mail-in voting, requiring Americans to send in a copy of their ID when both requesting and submitting their ballot. The Republicans have argued that legislation is needed to safeguard elections and prevent non-citizens from voting, something that data shows that's rare. No, there's an alternative motive from the Republicans and their leader. Democrats and voting rights groups say that the legislation would disenfranchise millions of Americans by making it harder to register to vote and to cast ballots. If the bill fully passes, millions of married people whose names on their birth certificates or passports don't match up with their names on other forms of ID could face extra hurdles to register to vote and cast their ballots, according to the Brennan, Brennan Center. Experts also warn that young people and individuals of color are more likely to face barriers to voting with the new requirements. A 2024 study led by the Center for Democracy and Civic Engagement at the University of Maryland found Black Americans and Hispanic Americans are disproportionately less likely to have a current driver's license than white Americans. The analysis also estimates more than 9% of voting age citizens, that's roughly 21 million people, cannot readily access documentary proof of their citizenship. Under current laws, many Americans need to present some form of ID to register to vote. Yeah, they always look at my driver's license. No problem. The act will require Americans to show additional documents that prove their citizenship, such as a passport or a birth certificate. It is already illegal for non-citizens to vote, and voters are required to attest to being a citizen when they register. But states decide how to enforce the law. 36 states have laws requesting or requiring voters to show some form of ID at the polls, according to a 2025 report from the National Conference of State Legislatures. The remaining 14 states and Washington, D.C. use other methods to verify the identity of voters, such as signing an affidavit or a poll book or providing personal information. Well, guess what, folks? I do both in Michigan and in Pennsylvania. The SAFE Act would increase those requirements, demanding Americans provide documented proof of citizenship to register to vote and require them to show an eligible photo ID document before voting, such as a driver's license. A 2025 poll of American adults showed widespread support for requirements to show government-issued photo IDs upon voter registration at 83%, though the question did not specify what type of ID. The bill is teeing up another critical fight in the Senate over the chamber's 60-vote threshold, also known as the filibuster. Conservative hardliners have advocated weakening the guardrail to fully pass the SAVE America Act. But without the filibuster, which has already been considerably curtailed in notable ways by GOP lawmakers during our president's second term, there would be little incentive for Republicans and Democrats to work together. Senate Majority Leader John Thune, Republican South Dakota, has said many times publicly that there aren't enough votes among Senate Republicans to further weaken the filibuster. Voting rights advocates have raised concerns that the bill could make voting more difficult for people who have changed their legal name. Again, it affects many married women who change their last names, whose names could be different on documents that prove their citizenship, such as a birth certificate and their driver's license or other photo ID. Tampa Vickery, Vice President of Programs and Strategy at the nonpartisan voting rights organization Headcount, said while claims that the bill would prohibit married women from voting are exaggerated, it would introduce new barriers to voter registrations. Quote, tens of millions of women have legal names that no longer match the name on their birth certificate, Vickery told USA Today. Under the bill, individuals would need to present citizenship documents such as birth certificate or a passport that match their current legal name in order to register to vote or update their registration. If they don't match up, Vickery says, voters may need to obtain additional documentation such as a marriage license, divorce decree, or passport, which could take time and cost money. That extra effort could add barriers to reduce participation, especially among people who have changed their names. Nearly 80% of women in opposite-sex marriages take their spouse's surname, according to a 2023 study by Pew Research. Most married men, 92%, keep their last names. Catherine Palmer is a political reporter for USA Today. Thank you very much for joining us. Pay attention to this podcast, because if you're married and your last name has changed, this definitely affects you. If you're Black or Hispanic, This definitely affects you. Start doing something now. Don't wait until the crisis develops. And remember, go over to our blog, passionworldtalkradio.com/blog. There you can listen to the podcast, you can read the summary, and more importantly, you can click on the USA Today link so you can read the whole article and this time take notes. Thank you very, very much. Have a terrific weekend, and we'll see you next week.